Hey guys, Chris Potter here, and in this video I'm going to be going over why Kil'jaeden, the end boss of Tomb of Sargeras, was the best and worst boss of this expansion. You may have heard varying opinions on Kil'jaeden. Some people like to call him the best boss ever, the worst boss ever, the most bugged, the hardest, etc. But really I don't think it's so black and white. Kil'jaeden was incredibly challenging and epic, but it was also riddled with bugs and design problems from Blizzard's point of view. Before we praise the boss, let's get those negatives out of the way. I think one of the most infuriating parts of our Kil'jaeden progress was not actually Kil'jaeden at all, but actually that the boss before Kil'jaeden was Fallen Avatar. Fallen Avatar was an extremely difficult fight mechanically, while also being riddled with bugs and things generally not working properly on the fight. Fallen Avatar could easily have been an end boss in its own right, and we were very frustrated with Blizzard because we had spent so much time on Fallen Avatar while it was actually unkillable. However, we persevered, and once Blizzard fixed a few things with the bosses, we were finally able to kill it and make it to the real end boss, Kil'jaeden. When we got to Kil'jaeden, this trend continued. The Armageddon had an insane number of circles that needed to be soaked, while also dealing a very high amount of damage. I believe that no other guild actually got to see the boss in that state, but it was just a lot of raid damage being taken. The ticking damage was just so high, there were so many of them, and the whole point is that this mechanic is supposed to go on through most of the fight until you get to the last phase, and it was just way too much damage, way too much coordination needed, and was ridiculous. The orbs that came from erupting players after you killed their reflection was completely bugged, and it would often kill people when the player was actually not touching the orb. Obviously, people had to provide evidence for this. You know, we were checking videos after it happened every pull, otherwise people would just blame it on it. But yeah, it was very messed up. There was some sort of bug in that the game thought our characters were in different places than they were on the platform, and this is what caused it. I think we came up with a solution of just logging out and then fixed it, but you didn't know you were bugged until you got killed by an orb, so it wasted a lot of pulls, and that really feels like a mechanic that Blizzard should have got in their internal testing team. I don't know how they didn't find that bug, but yeah, that wasted a lot of attempts and was generally frustrating. And then there's the knockback from the rupturing singularity orbs. It originally had such a large knockback that unless you were standing extremely close to it, you would still get knocked off the other side of the platform from its knockback. The knockback was absolutely huge when we first got to the boss and completely unreasonable. It gave no margin for error at all, and with all the other things going on in the fight was just too punishing. Again, it wasn't bugged, I would say it was just very overtuned. Then there's the tank ad. For those of you who have done the fight, you'll know that the purpose of the tank ad is that you kill it, which in turn gives the tank a debuff, and when you dispel the tank debuff, it basically AoE life flips your raid to the tank. This is useful because at some points in the fight, a rupturing singularity orb, aka the knockback orb, will actually come in the center of the platform, which means there's no way to avoid it. Blizzard's thought process here is that you dispel the tank as the knockback comes, and it grips everyone back onto the platform, everyone's safe. However, the problem was when we got to the boss, the health of the tank ad was just way too high and was basically impossible for us to kill. This meant that we had to use cheesy gateway strats that I'm sure you've seen in our kill video here. We basically had to time our click on the gateway within a second frame to click it as you get knocked back to completely avoid the knockback. We had so many wipes, just people getting knocked off the platform, so many attempts gone, so many battle reses wasted, especially in the early pulls. Obviously it got a lot better after a lot of pulls. We got to a point where no one would really mess it up after a lot of practice. We had to do some cool stuff with like binding interactive mouse over on our mouse wheel and spamming the mouse wheel at the right time over the gateway. But yeah, basically Blizzard kind of forced us to either use things like Goblin Jump, Displacer Beast, Blinks and things like that, or use the gateway for the classes that couldn't do that. This is how our pulls looked on the first night of Kil'jaeden. The massive advantage we thought we'd gain by being the only ones to be able to kill Avatar in the first week seemed to be disappearing quickly. All these problems that I just mentioned were only in phase 1, and this really stunted our progress on the building on the lead that we had. When we finally got to the boss in the second week, we'd hoped that Blizzard had maybe made some changes and that our gear would help, and we were coming back with more optimism. But in fact, there was still a lot more issues with the boss that we hadn't discovered yet. The first intermission was a complete mess. We literally couldn't get more than a few minutes into the fight. As you watch our kill video now on the screen, you can see that the first intermission has abilities coming very close together, and they're seemingly very dangerous. However, they actually come in a pattern that is reliable, and most importantly, the pace at which the abilities come are reasonable enough that you just have to have a plan and decent reactions to adjust everything, and it's completely fine. However, when we first got to the first intermission, all of these abilities were happening basically at random, overlapping massively. There were big gaps where no abilities were coming, the boss was just doing nothing, and then all of a sudden 2 or 3 of the abilities would come at the exact same time. On top of this, the focused Dread Flame that comes in that phase was dealing a lot of damage. Basically non-survivable damage. It was just killing everyone, and we actually just had people try and like suicide with it, you know, just so we could get a little bit further into the fight. There was no way we were going to survive it until they made some changes to it. But yeah, the first intermission, completely crazy. When we eventually got to phase 2, we found that it was extremely difficult, but in general it was actually pretty well tuned and seemed to work properly, most importantly. So far, every other phase we got into, there'd been massive problems with the fight, and we were happy to finally get to a phase where things seemed to be actually working as Blizzard intended. Following that is the Darkness phase. Now, the first step is finding Illidan, and while it is a bit annoying and a bit RNG, we did find a way to kind of influence where Illidan would land by moving ourselves around the platform differently, standing in different places, seemed to make him want to spawn or land in a different place. So that wasn't too bad, but generally the whole Darkness phase was kind of overtuned, and it forced us to cheese it really. We just wanted to get in and out as fast as we could. You've got to imagine that at this point in progression, we're, you know, multiple weeks into progression, we've had buggy fights, overtuned phases on Kil'jaeden itself. We're really getting quite fed up with this stuff. I can't stress enough how much at this point we were, you know, very much done with this progress. We were bored, you know, we wanted to get it over and done with at this point. And we got this Darkness phase where you can't see the orbs, and Blizzard's idea, I guess, is to have you scout them out with people and stuff, but we just wanted to get in and out of the phase. So our plan was, we only want to get 2 orbs landing, and then we want to be done. We want to have all the ads killed. So for that, we had the gateway trick again for one of them. As you'll see in my kill video, we literally just used the gateway like we did earlier on in the fight to avoid the knockback. And the second time is independent stuff, so goblin jumps, blinks, you know, leaps, all those kind of things, charges, shadow steps. So we were kind of forced to cheese that phase again. I'm sure it was possible without cheesing it, but it would have just taken a lot more tries, and we'd rather just cheese it. So that's what we did. We just blasted the ads as fast as we could, get the phase done as quickly as possible, so we only got 2 knockbacks. If we got a third knockback, it was basically a wipe. If we had a DPS check on ourselves there, if we got the third knockback, we were done. So our aim was to get the 2 knockbacks, get out of the phase straight afterwards, and move on to the last phase. And then we finally made it to the last phase. After all the wipes, all the progression, all the stresses, all the problems with the bosses, we get to the last phase, and we see that it starts with 5 obelisks. Now, for those of you who've done Heroic, maybe you think the obelisks aren't such a big deal. There's only a couple of them. Most of the platform is free space, and if you do get hit, it doesn't really kill you anyway. But on Mythic, when we got to the boss, it was one-shotting every time you got hit by it, and it starts with 5 and increased every time that they spawned. There would be more obelisks. So that means that after a couple of spawns of obelisks, most of the platform is going to be full of them, and there's not really going to be much safe area. And then there's the dot from the Darkness of 1,000 Souls. Basically, this dot has no duration, and it lasts until the end of the fight. It goes on all players at the start of the phase and remains until the boss is dead. Originally when we got there, it was ticking for over 1 million every 2 seconds on each player. So if you work that out, that means we would have needed 10 billion raid HPS just to counter that specific ability. In the last phase, there's also Bursting Dread Flame, Focused Dread Flame, and obviously tanks taking melee hits and the Fellclaws debuff. So if you think of just the dot, 10 million HPS required for just that is really insane between 5 hits. We all would have had to been doing 2 million HPS just for that one ability throughout the entire last phase. And while theoretically possible, it's a lot to ask of after such a long encounter where healers are going to have no mana, maybe people are dead, you don't know, but it's such a long fight and such a punishing fight to get to that phase and then get hit with that. I think it was theoretically possible, as I said, but it really would have taken maybe another 1,000 pulls, like if they'd kept it in that state. It was really insane. We voiced our concerns to Blizzard actually before we got to the last phase, and we did say that we thought it was going to tick way too hard. Like, how is this going to be healable? We'd already done, you know, the napkin math Blizzard told us, just pull it and see how it feels. You know, it should be fine. Just pull it. Just get to that phase first, and then they'll decide what to do. We got there in one pull, linked them a video clip of the raid frames, and we just kind of refused to pull the boss until they'd done something, because you have to imagine at this point we're so far into progression, dealing with all the other bugs on the fight, the difficulty of the fight in general. This is just Kil'jaeden. We also had Fallen Avatar just before this. We're exhausted. The boss is still in a ridiculous state. We kind of just took a dinner break and waited for them to fix it. Luckily, when we all came back from the dinner break, they had fixed it and they nerfed the dot by about 50%. That's a massive change, and that just shows you how ridiculous it was to begin with. To summarize why Kil'jaeden was such a failure from Blizzard, it was really bugged, overtuned, to the point where it felt like we were PTR testing it. I mean, really, some of the things we saw were just unbelievable. It felt like maybe their internal testing team hadn't even done the fight. It was a really long fight, full of all these punishing mechanics and bugged mechanics. And also it came after Fallen Avatar, which basically was the same thing. Completely bugged, completely overtuned, and it felt like Blizzard really didn't care too much at that point. Obviously they did make changes eventually, but we feel like they came too slowly, and I don't know, it really, for the big company they are, it felt like they really didn't care enough. Now that I've bashed Blizzard a little bit, we can give them some praise. Kil'jaeden was not only difficult because of the bugs and just ridiculous overtuning by Blizzard, he actually was a good boss that required a very high amount of teamwork between your raid. Soaking both the small Armageddons and the large Armageddons throughout the entire fight took a lot of coordination, with almost the entire raid having to take personal responsibility at some point. The effort that had to be put in by the raid leaders and add-on people to make sure everyone was on top of their assignments and not missing their times to soak consistently throughout the fight was actually remarkable. It took a lot of work. One slip up in that very long 15-minute fight and the try was out the window. And as you can imagine, there was quite a lot of tilt going around with these kind of wipes, but we really did pull together as a team and keep the attitude kind of positive, and everyone was focused on killing the boss. The healing ads that come in the second phase was actually something really nice to see. It's great to see healers being given extra challenges in raids, because usually on progress, the only question that's ever asked is, can we drop a healer? Is there a way that a healer can DPS for more of the fight? You know, we need to kill this ad quicker, we need to push the boss faster, can we drop a healer? That kind of thing. And as long as the raid's alive, no one really cares what the healers are doing. It is a shame, however, that no other healer except the Holy Paladin with his sack aura and his wings could do any meaningful healing to it though. It would have been much cooler for them to be something that spawned maybe at the start of the fight, and if they lasted the entire duration and had much more health, it would have been cool to have some kind of requirement to keep HPS on them throughout the entire fight, rather than just bursting them up with wings and sack aura and just blowing them up, which only the Paladin can really do. Though I did say it was overtuned and forced us to be a bit cheesy, the Darkness phase was something really cool. It's nice to have something that kind of shocks you into saying, you know, how the hell do we do this the first time you get to that. This is a moment that probably lots of you have had in your raids, no matter what difficulty you're doing, when you get to a new boss or a new phase and you're sort of like, you know, how do we do this? How is this possible? But the Darkness phase on Kil'jaeden was really the essence of that to a T. Though it was implemented poorly, and I think it should have been done a lot differently to not require cheesing it and kind of force us to use goblin racials and gateways and stuff, it is something original, and I like Blizzard coming up with these kind of original mechanics in the fights, and I'd like to see more things like that come, just implemented a lot better. Here's a list of all the changes that happened to Kil'jaeden from when we first got to the boss to how it was on live after our kill. I think about 90% of these changes actually happened on our early progression of the boss. One or two of them might have came just after our kill, but as you can see, there was a lot of big changes needed to make this boss playable properly. All my positives are generally contradictory to my negative points, but that's just the way it is. The fight was so good because it was such a struggle, and probably the biggest struggle that I've ever had in my WoW experience. The problem is that it was such a struggle for the wrong reasons. Blizzard did mess up big time, but the fact that we were able to overcome all of the problems, all the bugs, all the overtuned mechanics, and the frustrations that come from that really made it a great achievement for us. Whichever way you look at it, Kil'jaeden was a difficult and epic boss encounter that will go down in history for a lot of good and some bad reasons. I hope Blizzard presents us with more big challenges in the future. I just hope they are challenging for the right reasons and not the reasons that we had in that tier. Thanks for watching, guys. I've been Chris Potter, and I hope you've enjoyed the video.
Blue is
Blue boss.
in blue and circle was
Hero.
And you
And go away.
Skyline.
Laser coming. Yeah, Kai's the
Still
fucking north. Stay alive, boys.
World first now.
Just sack me.
Yes, you take
Fight.
You get
Yes!
Oh my god.